So if you need a roadie, call me. So Dan, by the way, seriously speaking, Colette and Daniel, he is in a band that I know, Soapbox Army. It's an extraordinary band.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, he writes good stuff.
Are you like excited about performing again in front of like audiences now?
Absolutely, yeah. Can't wait. I mean, that's definitely my favorite part. So it'll be interesting to get back out there again, and hoping that, you know, it encourages a lot more people to come out to local shows, that they're just kind of so deprived of it right now. So
Yeah,
I can't wait.
there was a cool thing, I think, at the St. James Theater last week. Nathan Lane and Savion Glover did this sort of quick
Yeah.
little let's get back to work kind of show. And I understand it was pretty good. So there's hope. There's hope.
Dan, what type of what genre of music does the
So
band, would you classify?
So that Soapbox Army is like indie rock, and then I have another project that's more of like a recording project that's more like a indie pop kind of thing.
Oh, that's great.
So yeah, you know, it's more like you know, keeps you sane kind of thing. Obviously not trying to make a career out of it, especially now. It's tough for even well-known musicians right now. It's got to be pretty challenging, but yeah, I love it. I just love writing. So
Well, that's a good thing. Given that that's true.
I just added you to my Apple Music playlist, so I'll listen to it. Not during the panel, but
immediately following.
after.
So
Immediately following, it's queued up.
Just FYI, Dan, I get 10%.
Of course you do.
So
fair.
In all seriousness, good stuff. Quality music. It's all over my playlist. You know that. I'm a fan.
Isn't that how this came up and how I'm on the panel right now?
No.
Weren't you? No, it came up. It reminded you heard the song. You're like, oh yeah, Dan.
Oh, you're right. That's true.
Yeah.
I was thinking
Dan would be good for that.
No, you're right. I forgot about that. But I was thinking about the panel, and I have music on all day, and boom, Soapbox Army came up, and I went, Dan, he's a content creator, a communicator. So I hadn't spoken to him in a long time.
And if you were listening to Taylor Swift, would Taylor Swift be here right now, or it was just by chance?
No offense, Dan, no offense, Dan, but I called her first. She wasn't available.
Yeah, all good.
You know,
she's got some things going on.
Springsteen, Eilish. You know, I went through a long list. So, no, it really was like that. It was an epiphany. The music was on, and I just. Fortunately, he said yes. So, Dabney, can you guys hear me or us?
Yes.
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, just a reminder, you'll hit record whenever you feel it's time. And, you know, it's a slow build. It's 5:37. I think we're going to wait maybe another minute or two, and we got to start. So, I know people will come in. They always do late, but I think we're going to start if that's okay. You think that's all right, girls?
Yeah, I think we're good.
Okay. I don't make a move without my interns. All right. And Dan, I will upload the recording into a Google share so I'll get you access to it and you can share that with
Mom and Pops.
Yep. So Daniel, if you recall,
yes,
when I left photography, I took that year off to rediscover, reboot, reinvent, and I found recruiting. And not quite a full year at a small boutique shop, but then through networking, I met a guy that owned a company that had just merged with another recruiting company, which was Dan's father's company. That's how I really
Oh,
know Dan.
wow.
So Bill, his father, ran and owned this division, and I worked under him. And he was a great mentor to me. I learned a lot about that industry. But I also learned enough about it that I didn't want to stay in it forever. But that is how I know Dan. So
That's great.
Now they're retired in Florida, playing
well,
golf all day long.
rough gig.
Rough life.
So, yep, that's okay. They earned it. They paid their
They
dues.
definitely earned it. Yeah.
All right. So I think we should get started, right? You guys up for that? All right.
Ready.
So, all right, you guys can hit the record button and I'm gonna go to it. So, good to go, Waverly?
Yep, we're good to go.
All right. So good evening, everybody. Welcome to Effective Communications Can Get You a Job. Tonight, we're going to talk about what communications is, not just in the workforce when you're thinking about as a student or an alumni, thinking about an internship, the job, your career, but communications will play a role in everything you do. And take note that the transferable skill list, the soft skill list, always in that top 5 or 6 is communication. I don't think I've ever seen a job description that did not say or reference must have good communication skills, writing, speaking. And both of those are communications tools. You're going to need those to move your life forward. And that's what life is about, professionally, personally, is moving forward. Because if you're not moving forward, guys, you are sitting still, worse, moving backwards. No fulfillment in that. So we're going to talk about that this evening with an extraordinary panel who I'm going to introduce real quick right now. I'm going to quickly read their bios, so you'll forgive me for speed reading, but we're going to go with it. So Colette Levenstein is a talent acquisition professional with 15 plus years of experience in corporate recruitment, focusing on technology, finance, supply chain recruitment, workforce planning, operations, and training. She has successfully developed new hire training, college recruitment programs, and focused on branding and recruitment partnerships with veteran and diversity and inclusion organizations. She's established her own company, Worker Bee, BEE, Talent Solutions, where she worked as a senior talent consultant focused on technology recruitment with such companies as UPS, Samsung, Goldman Sachs, Montefiore Information Technology, and GE Capital. Before creating her own company, she worked as a senior talent acquisition manager at an ad tech firm, Datron Media. Most recently, she was the Associate Director of Talent Acquisition for IPG Kinesso. Kinesso is a subdivision of the Interpublic Group in New York. One of the largest world's premier advertising and marketing service companies in the world. So happy to have her and welcome Colette. Daniel Morton, he is the Vice President and Associate Publisher of Penguin Workshop. As Vice President and the Associate Publisher, Daniel oversees both art and design and licensing acquisitions for the group. He collaborates on the development of more than 250 books a year, including Penguin Young Readers, Readers Licenses, Mad Libs, and The World of Eric Carle, Grosset, and Dunlap. I hope I said that right. And the New York Times bestselling series, Who Was? Daniel has spent the last 30 years in children's publishing and entertainment products. He has worked for some of the leaders in books and television, including Scholastic, Disney, Nickelodeon, Simon & Schuster. Daniel loves to work collaboratively to create new and innovative experiences for children. Just a quick FYI, for those of you that know my backstory, as a photographer, that's how I know Daniel. And the last project I did before I retired from photography was an incredible project called 39 Clues at Scholastic with Daniel.
Mhm.
So we have a long history. And then finally, Dan Tucker. Dan Tucker is an award-winning creative director, writer, and writer in advertising and marketing. He's worked for TV networks such as MTV, VH1, ad agencies like BBD&O, and global brands like Nike, American Express, Jaguar, Land Rover. Currently, he's the creative director for an experiential marketing agency, GPJ, working primarily on the IBM account. During his 20 years, Dan has had experiences working across a wide range of media and platforms, from traditional to digital, social, experiential, and even music journalism. He has also got a side hustle. He's a musician on the side, currently the singer, songwriter, and guitarist for indie bands Soapbox Army and Color Wars. Soapbox Army, good stuff, guys. So welcome all, and thank you for participating in this evening. So I've already kind of framed it out, and we're going to get right to it. So for the audience, what we're going to do is I'm going to do a quick moderating session. I will ask some questions, and then we're going to open it up to more of a town hall where you guys can ask whatever questions you have on your mind. So with that, Dan Tucker, I'm going to start with you.
Ooh.
Yeah, I'm sorry, buddy. I introduced you last, but I'm going to give you the first question. So in your words, what does effective communications mean to you? And not necessarily for a job search component, but what is effective communication to you? You're a communicator, you create content. So how does that frame out for you?
Yeah, I think from, just in general, as opposed to just, in the workforce or, in a job capacity, I think effective communications is really being able to make your points as clearly as possible, making sure that the content that you're delivering is engaging and compelling, and really, inspires whoever you're having that communication with to take action on whatever it is you're saying. And the same goes from the other way. Communicating, being able to absorb something that somebody's telling to you and being able to internalize that and craft your own communication back to that person that feels like it's a real dialogue and it's not kind of, a one-sided conversation.
So I'm going to come to you in a second, Colette. Students, take note, the key word, dialogue. Communication is not a monologue, it's a dialogue. It is a conversation. And when you're thinking about your careers, you're going to have to engage people. Another word Dan used, you're going to have to engage people in that dialogue. And a lot of that will fall on you. So Colette, you are a talent acquisition specialist and a talent acquisition professional. You deal with hiring. You vet candidates. Tell me about effective communication specific to what you do.
That's a good question. I think effective communication from the talent acquisition point of view is the ability to convey information in clear and concise manner so that the other person or the team receives the idea and understands the concept or expectation that you are trying to deliver.
Awesome. So Daniel, I didn't forget you, I promise. So in your professional world, you also manage content. You were on the creative side,
Yes.
and now you are more on the business side. So you cover a lot of different territories, but in your professional world, effective communications, internally at your office, if you had an intern, how does that play out for you? What does it mean for you in your world?
I think, this applies to my world. I think it also applies to general good communication. I think often when people think of communication, they think of them speaking and just delivering information. But I think maybe even more important to that is actually listening. I think listening is probably the key element to a conversation, because I know often people can be in their own head as someone else is speaking and they're thinking of the next thing they're going to say and they're not sort of present. And so listening, I think, is key to make sure that the other person that is in the conversation is actually recognizes that you've heard what they said. I think making sure that the person has heard you, like you could speak all you want, but unless you've been heard or understood, I don't think you've communicated clearly.
That's an awesome point. Some of the training I provide to students is listen, process, respond. You got to listen. It's great point, Daniel. Thank you. So Colette, how does effective communications play a role, in your opinion, I guess, or because you deal with college recruitment, from your experience, how will effective communication play a role in a student's ability to secure a good job or an internship?
I think effective communication, and in order for a student to secure a good internship, I really think that they have to convey clearly what it is that they expect to get out of the internship, and whether the internship expectations align to what their goals are. But as the recruiter, we don't really know that unless they can, effectively and clearly let us know what it is that their focus and goal are in, in getting an internship with our company. So I think that's really important to understand what it is that you're looking for to get out of the internship and be able to communicate that effectively to the recruiter.
And with that said, great stuff, great points. What should a student think about? Follow-up question for you, Colette. What should a student think about in order to be able to convey that message, that narrative on their own behalf? What kind of preparation do they need to think about?
That's a good question, prepping. I think that when you are looking for any sort of role, whether it's an internship or just a regular professional role, that you really need to understand if that role, that culture, that job, that manager aligns to what it is that you're looking for to accelerate your career. So I think coming prepared with some, questions in terms of, these digging questions to see whether the company culture, the job, the management style fits within what you're looking for in a company is really important. So preparing, having great questions ready to, and not just winging it. So coming to the table with like really good, informative, digging questions to find out whether this, role is for you is great preparation.
Awesome. And research clearly is probably a smart thing to do. That information is available, right?
Research is great. I think, researching a company before, because you never want to walk into a role and the recruiter is asking you, well, what do you know about us? And in this day and age, I don't think that recruiters are actually doing that. We're more like pitching our company to you, as opposed to, hey, what do you know about us? Because there's like standard information that that's on the internet. So, we really want to understand what it is that you're looking for, and then also pitch our company to you to make sure that there's an alignment in both, us as a company of choice, and also you, whether this aligns to your career goals as well. Because we want both, sides to be happy in the equation.
And there's another good point for the students. It's not about only you, it's about them as well. In fact, when you're looking for a job, more often than not, it's about them and the criteria. If you meet it, they're interested in you. If you don't meet it,
There's some noise in the background.
I'm not hearing that.
Okay.
So maybe the paper I'm rustling, I'm sorry.
Oh, no worries.
Okay, I'll rustle more quietly. So, but you guys need to understand that I kind of lost my train of thought here, so I'm just going to move on to the next question. We're not going to worry about it. Dan Tucker, is it essential today to have good communication skills, and why?
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely essential to have good communication skills. I mean, if we're talking about from a job prospects capacity, it's definitely essential. I think there's so much, we're barraged with information all day long. Everybody's super busy. Everyone's kind of in their own world. And so to be able to have that skill set to be able to communicate with people and cut through the noise, I think is totally essential and critical, especially when it comes to looking for a job, because there's a lot of sort of tactical things that you need to employ as you're looking for whatever that role is, whether it's an internship or a job somewhere. So in general, I think, effective communications is essential, and yeah, absolutely for the job.
And Daniel, I'm going to ask you to add to that a little bit as well, please.
Yeah, it's interesting, Dan mentioned, the barrage of information that is on your phone, on your computer, on the TV, we are, information is just constant, taking in information in all different doses. And I think what used to be good communication for me, and I don't even know if it was good communication, I think when I look back to earlier in my career, when I wrote emails, mostly an email, I look at them now if I come across them, and they are like paragraphs of like an essay question. And I think now, like, who wants to read that? Like, you open an email like that and you are just close it and may never come back to it. So I think nowadays even more, I mean, I think this always applies, but nowadays, and in particular in our group with the leadership we have with my publisher, he has a short attention span before you lose them. And so your communication has to be short, it has to be concise, it has to be direct, and it can't go on tangents and provide sort of like a fluff or narrative to it. It's really just direct, clear, and concise. And I think that, it varies. It varies, I'm sure, from industry to, it varies even from, in my industry, publishing house to publishing house. Culture has a huge part of that. Like, what is the culture? What is the mode of communication? What is the form of communication that's most, more effective than another, whether it's email or a text or a phone call or an in-person conversation. But I definitely think the shorter, the more concise, the more direct. And I think it's harder than you think to do that.
Yeah. So, and that leads me to a follow-up, which I'm going to ask all of you. Because of the technology today, it really does redefine everything. It's the root structure, I think, of everything we do: communication, finance, marketing, messaging, everything. So because of technology, we've got a variety of ways to communicate. Back in the day, we had a phone and you had mail. Now we've got devices and computers and phones and whatever. So when someone's communicating, whether internally or if someone's looking for a job, and maybe I'll start with you, Colette, on this one. If a student is setting up an interview, or you set up the interview with a student, what is the rule of thumb, the rule of engagement? Because Dan used the word tactical. There are tactical things. Should they do LMK, let me know, or how should they present that? Is it a shorthand? Even though Daniel's right, keep it to the point, keep it economical, but should they keep it professional? How does that work?
You should absolutely keep it professional and consistent and clear when you're communicating. The texting, the LMK, the LOL, the ROFLO, whatever you want to call it. That's for sorry, I'm not up on my texting.
I don't know what that one is. I don't even know that one.
There's something like ROFL, something like that. Like, I don't know what that is, but people write that to me. I'm like, what does that mean? So that's why you
Waverly or Dabney, can you unmute and tell us what that means? Do you know?
Rolling on the floor laughing.
Yes, there you go.
I think that just means maybe we're of an older demographic. I certainly don't know any of them. So
okay, so I'm not going to go there. Okay, so Dan, you work in content creation. You're a communicator all the time. That's what you do. You do it on behalf of your agency. You do it on behalf of your client, IBM. But internally, when people are talking, is there a lot of that sort of loose kind of abbreviated banter, and is that acceptable there? But if someone from the outside were reaching out to you, would you prefer that they manage it a bit more professionally? Do you even take note of that?
Yeah, and I think especially now that we're just inundated with, at least where I am now, it's just so busy. But you're on so many different forms of communication. So I'd have a chat window open. There's the emails. It's just, you're all over the place. So I think, you do these kind of quick shortcuts to just, keep up the speed and keep up the pace when it comes to an internal environment. So sometimes, yeah, I mean, I use LOL all the time. I use, I don't do the LMK and all those kinds of things, but that's totally acceptable, I think, within your kind of group. Obviously, there's a level of professionalism that you need to be aware of, but when it comes to the outside world and communicating with clients and things like that, it's all business, all professional. You can definitely like joke around depending, but that also depends on the individual or the group that you're working with. You just have to understand and have that awareness of who you're dealing with and how much you can push things.
Right. So I think the key word there, guys, the audience, is awareness. So it's a good segue to my next question, and it's really for all of you, but I want to start with you, Daniel. When you break communications down, you've got a sender, you've got a receiver, there's a message we're sending, there's a note, some kind of content, but the interpretation today, it's one thing when you're talking to someone, you can deal with context easily, but when you are typing it out, what does that mean with communication? Because I know I've sent emails to colleagues and I didn't mean X, but they interpreted it as X. And sometimes it really creates a bit of a ruckus. So how do we deal with proofreading? How do we make sure what we want to convey is what's received? Any thoughts on that could help the students because they are communicating as they're looking for internships and jobs?
Well, I use this rule when sending an email, and I know it because I'm particularly like heated or angry or worked up, and I just like hit reply and I start typing away, and as I'm doing that, I realize what I should do is I should write the email, and then I should save the email in a draft, and I should let it sit, and I should come back to it, because I would guarantee you 95% of the time when you go back and reread that email, you'll notice that you'll either delete half of what you wrote, or you won't send the email to begin with, because I think I personally think email and texting is a really hard mode of communication. I think it might, and I mean this seriously, I think it might be really different for the younger the generation, the more adept they are at it. But I could tell you, like, sarcasm and subtlety and nuance is really hard to get across in emails and even in texting, and it doesn't come across. So it's really hard. Communication becomes sort of troubled, I think, in those formats. So again, I think in those formats, I think clear and direct is the way to go, because again, you don't have the face-to-face, you don't have body language, you don't have facial expressions, which I think makes up more than half of the conversation. All that stuff contributes a huge part. You can tell more about a person at how they're sitting, and whether they're rocking back and forth or their hands are anxious. You can tell somebody that's anxious or nervous just the minute they walk into the room. I think that's pretty clear. So
yeah, body language can speak pretty loud.
Yeah.
So Colette, same question. I mean, breaking communication down, sender, receiver, in between is the message, the content, but the context of it, the interpretation. I tell students, I have a 3P rule. Before you hit send, proofread, proofread, proofread. Because I think it's a smart thing to do, and that's what Daniel was talking about. He saves it in the draft and he revisits it. How cautious should students be about their messaging?
I think you should be very cautious, not nervous, but cautious. I like to call those conversations high stakes communication. So, when you're in a high stakes communication sort of situation, when you're asking for an internship or a job or a favor, those are things, to me, those are high stakes communication. So I agree with what Daniel said, write out the email, don't send it, step away from your desk, and then come back and reread it. But I also think that you can run the email by a colleague or a friend. hop on a quick call with someone to help you clarify the message that you're trying to send. I think a lot of people are underneath a lot of pressure to get things done because that's how we operate in this day. Like, let's just get it done. Let's just send it. And I think that when you're in a high stakes conversation, something that, you really are looking forward to, or you really want, I think taking the time to step away, reread, rewrite, or asking a friend, what do they think about what, if they were receiving this message, what would they think? I think those things are helpful. Or even, if you're in college, you have a counselor, ask, hop on a call, and, I want to clarify a situation with you before I send it. Those are the kind of things that I would do, but I wouldn't necessarily, if it's something that really means a lot to me, I would take the time to do my due diligence to make sure that I'm sending the right message to the receiver.
All right, and Dan, I'm just going to run it by you as well. It seems to be a similar common thread amongst us, but your feeling?
Yeah, I 100% agree with Daniel and Colette on that. I mean, I feel like when it comes to the email thing, I've in my career, when I was probably a little bit more green and less experienced, I've definitely been guilty of sending things what I probably shouldn't have, and I even notice it with my coworkers now. I go, oof, I remember doing that. As soon as you get it, you can't tell. It's so hard, as Daniel said, to know the tone that's being conveyed within an email. Once emotion gets introduced, I think, like to Daniel's point, if it's just to the point and succinct, that and it's all business and professional, that's fine. But once there's a little bit of emotion that's introduced in a communication, that's where things get tricky. And I constantly am passing it over to my wife, and she'll be like, "You can't send that. Look at it," and then she'll show me an email, and like as if she's the master of emails, and then she shows me, and it's like as bad or worse, so I think we just don't really know ourselves. We need to Colette's point, we need other people that you trust, and especially somebody who is good at communicating and can craft those communications, to take a look and advise you on that.
All right, so Dan uses his wife to edit. Daniel, you have editors. You have a whole army of editors probably at Hanger. You have resources. All right, moving along. This question is really for all of you. And it's a little bit of a long-winded preface, but indulge me. Students are often centered on finding an internship, a job, or a volunteer experience, or some opportunity that's going to build their resume, get them real-time experience, stuff that will separate them, we hope, from that connection is an ability to communicate. What's in between that threshold between that opportunity and them, finding it? So it could be a networking event, an interview, job fair. Maybe they just bump into somebody at Starbucks, who knows? But what bridges the gap to help them get that dialogue going? Are there magic silver bullets out there to kind of get a conversation going? I know it's a little abstract, but students ask me this often, and that's why I made note of it. So if I'm at Starbucks, I bump into somebody, a conversation ensues. How do I communicate more about who I am, what I do, where I do it? Is there a secret potion, something like that? You can say no, it's okay.
I don't know if there's a secret potion. I mean, I'm an extrovert, so if I see someone that's interesting to me, I'll go up to them and say, "Hey, my name's Colette. I'm sorry to be butting in. You don't know me, but something about what you said was interesting." Like I'll lead with something like that. I'll find out something interesting about that person, or observe something interesting about that person, and then go up and reiterate my interest, and then talk to them about, what it is that I'm looking for, and see if there's meeting of the minds. One of the big things that I hear, and which is a big kind of like, it makes you take a little step back, is when a person just comes up to you and asks you for things. And I think, that could be a little bit just a little bit unnerving for the receiver. So I think that, looking at that person, observing something about them that's interesting and opening with that is a good way to start a conversation. I would love to hear what everybody else has to say, but that's normally what I do.
You're going to hear it.
Well,
'Cause I'm going to pass it on to Daniel.
It's interesting. I mean, I was gonna say the same thing, but I was gonna say something, I guess, similar. And that is, I think authenticity is a key part of, like, Jimmy, I think you mentioned, like, what's that spark? What's that thing that can make a conversation really, not even effective, but just really charged and like exciting and feeling like it's really, I think, authenticity. So meaning, I guess what I mean is, if there's, I'm making this up, but if you're a fashion designer and you run into somebody that either as a fashion designer or works in the fashion industry or is carrying sort of fashion swatches or something, like if you're compelled to sort of reach out to them or approach them on the basis of a really authentic connection, and that is like a real shared interest in a career in fashion, or your interest, or maybe you do that. I think those sort of conversations flow naturally because they're authentic and they feel real, rather than, I think Colette said this to some degree, like she reaches out because she notices something unique in somebody that sort of like, raises her eyebrow and she sort of, approaches them. I think that's more effective than somebody trying to sort of, like, I'm thinking like fitting a square peg in a round hole. Like if you're sort of like, I can do anything and I'm approaching you and whatever you need, I'll do. That doesn't feel natural to me. I feel like if it's a fit, it's a fit. And sometimes it's not a fit. And it maybe has nothing to do with you could be as effective as communication wise. But I think part of it is authenticity, maybe even some sort of spontaneity, something, I think there is some unknown aspect of this that gets you the job. I think there's a lot of pieces.
And clearly the dog agrees with you.
The dog agrees. She really has a lot to say.
We could end this session now. The dog agrees. So Dan, same to you. We've talked about, Colette mentioned observation as something, observing people, authenticity from Daniel. In my mind, sort of what I'm hearing is a bit of a common thread that you try and discover. Your thoughts on that? Students go to a networking event, job fair. How do they initiate? How do they get it going?
Yeah, I mean, it's different scenarios. It sounds like we're talking about, because there's, the Starbucks kind of situation with the kind of blind, like talking to somebody if you overhearing. And Colette mentioned being an extrovert, and I think a lot of it has to do with, for me, like personality types and how you approach those situations. So, I think, if I consider myself more of an introvert, and if I'm in a situation like that, it kind of, to Daniel's point, I have to feel really compelled or in the right state of mind to be able to do something like that. I'm not going to do that all the time. So you have to feel, like Daniel said, I think there has to be an authenticity and a comfort with doing that. But, when it comes to the actual job fair kind of thing, I think it's more about, it's probably about the research, right? I would assume a lot of it has to do with going into the situation and understanding what you're supposed to do in those situations, who's going to be at this networking fair, like get to know the people that might be showing up. And then just, when it comes to being there, I think, to Daniel's point, it just has to be authentic. A lot of it has to do with experience too. Just doing those things over and over and building that experience. I think for me, I struggled a lot early on in my career to overcome some of the like shyness in presenting and things like that. So sometimes I would get like really, whenever I would present, my voice would just kind of change pitch and I would be stuttering and stuff like that. And I think it's literally just a matter of doing it, like you have to just overcome that sort of. And I know that, I think this is another question that's coming up, Jimmy, but it's really just repetition and experience and practice is really what does it, and you just get better at it over time.
And I think the takeaway for the students is, I don't know if practice makes perfect, but the practice makes you better, without question. And I think that's a good point. You talk about the job fair, Dan, it's the research, you know your target, you know your audience. If you don't, if you go into an event or a situation, professional organization, a student organization meeting, any of that stuff, if you go in not prepared, then you're not prepared. So I think that research probably does make a difference. So body language came up a little bit ago. Daniel brought that up, and then I sort of echo that body language can be just as loud as any kind of communication. So Colette, body language, it's certainly, I think, an effective communicator. Wait, I'm not picking on you.
No, I just had a conversation about this today.
Oh, good. So practice will make you better. So I know it's an effective communication tool because people do read it, especially someone in your industry with talent acquisitions and so on. Can it really hurt somebody at an interview or a networking meeting? I mean, does that impact make an impression on someone?
Yes, yes, because if you're, by body language, you engage, you can just see if the person is excited about talking to you or excited about talking about the opportunity. Is the candidate smiling? Are they leaning forward? Are they listening? Are they beaming with pride when they're telling you about a school project? You look for all these things. So I think that body language is definitely something that is very helpful, especially and I'll say for people where English is not their first language. Sometimes the unspoken kind of like message that you send by being engaged with body language, supersedes at the actual spoken word. So, and I think that when we feel that people are engaged and really are interested in what we're saying as recruiters, we're more willing to work with you than not. So I think body language does play a very important, part in the interview process.
Okay, so it's interesting you bring up language. One of my follow-ups to the body language is our university has a large international student community, and I engage with students every week. Many of them don't have a great fluid command of speaking English. They understand it, but speaking it is not their sweet spot. So you had just mentioned, so I'm not really going to ask the question because you brought up the idea of leaning forward. Students, pay attention to those little tips, being engaged. The messaging behind what Colette just said is really quite significant for all of us, but for students that might be shy. Dan had mentioned that's how his career started. He had to practice and build up. So there's a lot of messaging here for you students to take away. But the international students, because that comes up in my meetings with them often. So what Colette just said, I love the idea of the leaning forward, the being engaged. It really does show that you are involved. So go ahead, Daniel.
I also think, yeah, just in addition to leaning forward, which is like, yeah, that's like, it's one simple gesture that says a lot. But I think I've come across this a lot. I may have even been that person when I was, doing when I was, being the one interviewed, but I get this a lot where and it's probably, it can be very uncomfortable to be, in an interview and it's everything's at stake and you put a lot into it and it can be nerve wracking. But I've interviewed a lot of people where I'm doing talking and, I may talk for 3 or 4 minutes. And in that 3 or 4 minute period, you're looking at the person and they're perfectly upright and they're professional, but there's no reaction in their face. There's no gesture of recognition at all. So it's at a certain point, I have to stop and, let them speak. But I think even whether it's leaning forward, it could also just be a nod. Like the nod of recognition goes a long way. You can be like, oh, they are hearing me. They're not, the nod of agreement or the nod of surprise, whatever it is, some reaction. I don't mean interrupt them, but I mean just like, be a little more engaged in this sort of cadence of the conversation, and it doesn't, body language doesn't have to be verbal. It could just be nodding, smiling, leaning forward. You know, you could even laugh if it's a really funny story, but that's helpful to communicate. Because like, you know, it's important to know that you're being heard. But when you're staring at someone who's so stiff and just waiting for their moment to talk, or feared of, you know, being in terror that they're going to get the next question, it's hard to watch sometimes. It's hard to be on the other side and watch the really uncomfortable, nervous person with no reaction. Is a hard person to interview.
I tell students
Usually
all
don't
the
understand anything.
time, somebody's got to mute. Thank you. I tell students all the time that when you're in an interview or you are engaged with someone, it's very important to breathe.
Yeah.
They do tighten up. They are nervous, you know, and
Yeah.
good reason. This is, you know, an interview is a big deal. You know,
Yeah.
and students, to me, an interview by definition, it's a conversation between two people to exchange information, but they really build it to something beyond that, and it does freak some of them out. So again, students, the takeaway of what you're hearing here, the body language, that additional element that you could add can really make a difference of how you're perceived by the hiring community. Good or bad, I guess, right? So, all right. So I read, in researching for tonight, I prepared. I read the term workplace communications. So what my understanding of that was, it's specific to organizations. Different organizations have a different communication. Do you agree with that or not? And does that change, I mean, the way you might approach somebody, whether it's an interview or any kind of meeting? But do different industries have different forms of communications? The three of you represent three different kind of categories. So go ahead, Colette.
Well, in my experience, you know, I've been in the workforce for a lot of years. So in my only two ad tech, you know, roles that I've been in, the communication is a little more informal, as I would if I were working in financial services or professional services. I would say my first experience with like, hey, James, or hey, Dan, or hey, like that wouldn't be something I would write if I was working for a hospital or for a bank. It would be good morning. It would be hi, how are you? Like I just find that there's a lot, there's some informal ways of how people communicate in our industry, in the ad tech industry. And it's a little, sometimes I just have to remember, it's like, hey, you know, you're in this industry and this is how people communicate. But I'm consistent in my communication. I don't fall into like the, you know, like the informal or the overly formal. I have like a certain way of communicating, which is more like your, you know, your workplace, your regular professional communication.
So do you have a real awareness of that consistency, or is it just instinctive?
Myself or for
Yeah.
other
You know, for you. I'm just
Yes,
curious.
I'm extremely self-aware. So yes.
So,
And sometimes I have to catch myself because I find myself going, hey, Jimmy. And I'm like, oh, you know, that's not how I communicate. That's out of the norm. And I'm falling into someone else's, you know, communication style. So I have to constantly reinforce my own standard of communication.
so Dan, you as well. You're a communicator again, you know, you've been in different industries. You've been in broadcast, you've been all over the place. Does that communication change from industry to industry from your experience?
Well, for my particular, like my career, it's mainly been at, you know, in a creative capacity. So it's, you know, whether I've been at a network or I've been working in-house somewhere else or at an ad agency, it's all kind of the ad agency creative vibe, which is very much the, hey, you know, wear whatever you want. It's just that's kind of the way it is built. The creative department in ad agencies, even if you see the account people and account managers, they're all kind of, you know, in suits or a shirt and tie and every day, and the creatives come in with the hoodie and, you know, like tatted up. Like it's just, so there's definitely, it's all, I don't want to say it's encouraged, but they kind of embrace the fact for me, in particular, my department, that you can have those conversational communications and keep it pretty casual. Now, when it comes to like the interpersonal communications with other departments or communicating with the clients, I mean, generally the creative doesn't communicate with clients, but I've been doing a lot of that as of late because we've lost a lot of people due to COVID, unfortunately, and furloughs and things like that. So, you know, you're just kind of directly dealing with clients, which has been great because, you know, it does awaken a little bit more of a different skill in you that, you know, in terms of having to, how do you communicate directly with a client who's responsible for basically paying your salary, you know, as opposed to like your coworker. So I think it just depends on, you know, who you're dealing with, but yeah, and when it comes from industry to industry, to Colette's point, I think as soon, because at first I wasn't sure I understood your question entirely, and then when she answered it, kind of, oh yeah, because I'm thinking about, again, my wife works in education and as an assistant principal, and she shows me the way that she communicates with her staff and things like that, and it's so professional, it's so formal. And it's just been so long that I've, you know, been involved in that type of communication, but it is much more common, I would think, to be that way than it is to be, you know, sort of conversational and casual.
So it's sort of knowing your audience.
Yeah,
and how to
absolutely.
work
Yeah.
with that, with them. All right, Daniel, you're shaking your head. Do you want to add to that?
Yeah, no, I think I'm gonna agree with what Colette and Dan both said. I think, you know, I worked for the first 10 years of my career in publishing and in educational publishing specifically. And so I learned my, you know, I learned my skills in that industry. So I think the biggest surprise that I think speaks to this, where there really was a shift from email to hallway conversation to meetings to like everything, was when I left Scholastic, which I was still in educational publishing, and I took a position at Nickelodeon, which I took a book position. I was working on books for them, but I moved from a publishing house to an entertainment company, and that was night and day. They were both for kids, but just how people spoke, just how meetings were run, it was very, very, very different. And I had to sort of retrain myself to speak the language that this company was speaking, because I felt like, I definitely at the beginning felt like odd man out. I definitely felt like my emails were not sort of in the right like I was speaking a different language almost. There really is industry to industry really strong shifts in what's acceptable, how, you know. And then I think over time, maybe if you're staying within the industry, you sort of you find your voice. But that comes with, I think, years of you know, doing it, practice, and maybe experiencing a couple of different office environments.
So, and that's another good thing about interning for the students. So what you guys are talking about, I call it industry fluency. I mean, I think it's important to be fluent in your industry, whether you're targeting someone looking for the internship with a job, or you're actually in there. You should have some understanding, I think, and we all seem to agree, but I want the students to understand that there should be some understanding of what that language, that fluency is. And it sounds like it's important to kind of get your head around that. So all of you have some leadership positions of some sort. Is it important for a good leader to be able to communicate effectively and avoid confusion, provide some purpose, you know, building up some positive sort of qualities around us? I mean, as a leadership, what does communication mean for you guys, personally speaking?
I think you act, when you're a leader, you're like an informal mentor to people, you know, and they're looking at you and how you know, communicate to your stakeholder, how you communicate to the team. You know, for people who are trying to aspire to your level, they emulate you. So, you know, it's, as a leader, it's really important in how you communicate. and to be self-aware and to have the right vocabulary for the right situation, and, be able to let people know that it's okay to express emotion, but in a professional manner. So, yeah, I absolutely, as a leader, communication does matter.
Dan,
Yeah.
your thoughts, Dan, and Dan, I'm gonna ask all of you. So Dan, you want to go next?
Yeah, I mean, I would 100% agree with Colette. And it's something that I think about a lot, because I feel like hyper aware of how maybe I'm perceived to people who work on my team, because I'm very much interested in being sort of a mentor to people starting out, because I always felt like I wanted that, and I didn't really feel like I did have that starting out my career. So I'm very aware of like how I might be coming across, and I think it's extremely important, when being aware of your surroundings and how you're coming off to other people, because they are, to Colette's point, going to sort of emulate that. Or if you're a terrible leader, they're going to learn to not be anything like you, and or they may become exactly, I don't know. But I feel like through my career, I felt like I absorbed the things that from bosses that I thought were doing a great job, and I should be learning from, and I kind of discarded the things that I felt like were not going to be good for my career. And I think that's what I would assume most people do, whether they're consciously thinking about it. But it is really important to make sure you're communicating and perceived in the right way to your team.
Right. So just before you go, Daniel, something Dan just said for the students, and that is, if you have the bad leader, you learn what not to do, and that's just as valuable when you're coming up through interning, early entry level jobs. Learning what not to do can be more important actually than what to do. So pay attention to those signs that you are surrounded by, because it's all meaningful somehow, some way. Daniel, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I was gonna speak specifically to that point. There is, I can guarantee you that there will be no shortage of bad communicator leaders to learn from. Like, just because people are in a high position does not mean that they come with great communication skills. I've worked with a lot of people, so it is weeding through. You'd be surprised how many people in high positions are terrible leaders and the worst communicators. So it leads you to wonder, how did they get there? And you hope that there was some other skill that brought them there. Wonderful voice, beautiful painter, like it's got to be something else, but it doesn't all come wrapped in a package. And I think when you do have those communication skills, those leadership skills, that authenticity, as well as whatever your skill itself is, I mean, that's a package that's really attractive to people. And you can see it right away. I mean, I think you can recognize that in people. And just also creatively in the creative process of communication, that could kill a project right off the bat, because you learn over time that you have to communicate clearly. You can't just say, make this more dynamic, because what does that mean? Like, what dynamic to me might be completely different, and you get it back and you're like, what is this? And you're like, that's dynamic. No, it's not. So you can say, make it bigger, move it to the left, make it brighter. Like, you have to change your adjectives, because what's dynamic or commercial or sexy is not the same from one person to the next. So that was learned over years and years of like fine tuning how to communicate art direction.
Awesome. So I'm going to wind down a couple of more questions, then I'm going to turn it over to the students. Can communication skills be taught? Is it something that we really can teach students, entry-level employees? Don't all of you jump on this at once. So I'm going to start with,
I think it's a simple yes. Yes.
okay, there you go. So, okay. So in your own way, 'cause what you had just said before, dynamic, yes. Can you clarify that a little more? How would we be able to teach that? Are there ways to do it? I mean, I agree with you. Yes, you can be taught, but are there ways that we as leaders can teach people how to do that?
Oh, yeah, I mean, I think Colette said it, by setting an example is probably the best way to do it, to set the example, to set the tone, to show effective, comfortable leadership with a team, I think is probably the best way to do it. There's the more obvious way to do it, which is, you know, at Penguin where I work, there's a lot of corporate training and a lot of seminars. They do a lot of employee relation stuff. And I've taken quite a few effective communication classes, which, you know, are seminars or last 1 or 2 days. And you'd be surprised, we took a whole 6 hours session on just listening. Like it was, you think, you know, you see the seminar, you're like, really 6 hours on listening? And there's a lot of nuances to that. So I think, yeah, I think communication skills can be taught and learned.
Okay. Colette, you're shaking your head yes. Anyone?
I agree with that. I do think that communication skills can be taught. Great communicators, I feel, focus on what they hear and they focus on what the speaker is trying to say to them. You know, normally people, when they're being communicated to, they're checking to see whether they understand. They also are checking to see whether they are misunderstanding and respond to that, not by simply agreeing or disagreeing, but to examine what the person is trying to convey to them, or they try to clarify what is being said to them. So I really think that, you know, to be a great communicator, you have to understand what you're hearing and what the person is trying to convey to you. And then checking to see whether you understand or you have a misunderstanding, or whether you agree or not agree, but also too, just making sure that you don't respond with like, oh, I disagree or I agree, but more with a question of, am I hearing this correctly? Or can you add more detail? Or, you know, this is how I'm experiencing you or this conversation. I think it's really important to listen and ask questions and make sure that you are actually hearing what the person, or understanding is what the person is trying to say to you.
So Dan, I'm going to come to you in a second, but a follow-up question, Colette, you brought up something interesting. On an interview, if a student's in an interview and a question is asked, and they just don't understand the question, is it acceptable for them, or I guess anybody on an interview, is it acceptable to say, I'm not sure I understand that, or could you reposition the question? Is that an acceptable thing?
No, I love that. I
Okay.
love that because it shows to me that they really are listening and that they really want to answer the question. All they need is a little more detail from me. Usually if a person is reacting to you, and I'm using the word reacting, if they're reacting to you in either a positive or negative way, I think as the person delivering the message, they're responding that way because either I'm giving them the detail that they need to respond positively, or I'm not giving them enough detail for them to, and that's why they're responding to me negatively. So really the onus is on me to provide you the detail that you need so you can respond to me in the manner that, you know, in the manner that I need. You know, do you see what I mean?
Absolutely, yeah, no, and I asked that question specifically because it comes up a lot when I deal with students and we're doing a mock interview session, or they have an interview and they have some questions to ask me about preparation or whatever. And sometimes that will come up, you know, what do I do if I don't know the answer? I don't understand. I always tell them what you said, just ask them. You know, they're asking you for a reason. You want to be able to give them something, so make sure you're clear on what they're asking. So I'm glad that you provided that. I think that's good stuff for the students to hear. So Dan, you know, as a communicator in a variety of ways, as a leader or someone who creates content on behalf of clients and so on, that's certainly messaging. Can communication skills be taught, do you think?
Yeah, and I mean, I agree with, Daniel and Colette, pretty much, everything that they've been saying is totally spot on. And I think to me, it's a combination of, you can definitely be taught. And then I think a lot of it is experience and time. But as far as, the point that Daniel and Colette made about around listening, I mean, that was going to be my answer right away. And I think it goes back to something Daniel said at the very beginning, that that's such a valuable part of the communication. It's not, you think of communication being the person talking, but it really is about, listening to what the person's saying and absorbing it and digesting it, and then kind of bringing something forth that's going to keep that dialogue going and enrich the conversation. Because I think we forget that, like, and I'm guilty of it myself, when if I'm presenting work to a client, sometimes you feel like you are really passionate about something and you want to try and sell it to that other person, but you just almost steamroll, the whole thing. And there's the person on the other side of that wants something out of this, like, relationship too. It's not just like, oh, you want to sell your, what you think is a cool idea. They need something out of this too. So you just need to be able to, like, negotiate that relationship in the right way. So it's not just like a one-way street.
Right. So key word there for the students, relationship. And relationships, guys, that's based on trust. You got to earn trust from people. If you're communicating, it takes time to do that. You build that. Nobody deserves anything, you earn it. And trust is something you have to earn. Every relationship is based on trust. If your dog doesn't trust you, there's no relationship. So there's a key word there, relationship. Well, it's the truth. Ask Daniel, his dog is right next to him. So I'm going to turn this over to students. I've talked enough. So what I'm going to ask you students to do is unmute, just introduce yourself by name, maybe what your major is, and ask away.
Hello, my name is Melanie Formosa. Thank you so much for giving your insights. I'm a journalism major, so communication is my focus. And I'm wondering how I'm kind of turning around the table here. As an interviewer, how would you recommend communicating with then your guest? So how do you ask enticing questions and kind of get your point across succinctly?
It's a tough
I'm
one.
gonna go back to what, and I'm sorry if I'm misquoting. I think it's Daniel who said, or Dan that said that having a dialogue. Like, I don't interview. My goal is not, I don't conduct my interview like you're my interviewer and I'm the interviewer, and it's this question and you're going to answer. I'm more of a dialogue person. I like dialogue, and I think dialogue really kind of it eases the person, it eases the interviewee. It makes them more relaxed when you're having a conversation with them, as opposed to like shooting questions at them. I just think that is not, my style, and I don't encourage any junior recruiter that I'm training to have a sort of like question and answer style. I encourage the dialogue.
Yeah, it was early on. Dan had mentioned it really in the beginning of this whole thing, and we were talking about monologue dialogue. Conversation is a key piece of it. And if you can put someone at ease, Melanie, you're going to create a conversation. So before I take Shazim, I hope I'm saying that correctly. I see that Waverly put in the chat box for all of you. You can either unmute, raise your hand, unmute, or you can put something in the chat room, and Waverly will probably manage that for us as well. So Shazim, am I saying that correctly?
Yes, you're pronouncing it correctly.
Good. You're up.
All right then. So thanks for coming again to this panel discussion. And one of the questions, and you guys made a lot of good points about communication, but I want to ask this specific question. So I've got this internship for one of my dream companies, and I really want to try to sort of show that I'm committed after I've done this internship. So what sort of communicative cues, as I would say, would I need to kind of practice in order to show that, hey, I'm in here for the long run?
I would, this may be not the answer you're looking for, but I would probably find somebody that's in a position that could, an influential position, and sort of say exactly what you just said. Hey, I'm in this for the long role. What do I need to do? I'm willing to take on more. I can work on this. I would love to do a side project. I think it's hard, sometimes between intern and whoever is at the level of making these decisions, or has the capacity to bring somebody like you on. There may not be a lot of opportunity for interaction and dialogue. So I wouldn't be subtle. I'd put it that way. I would be direct and just politely, not barge into their office, but say, hey, when you have a moment, I would love the chance to speak to you. And, I think anybody has an intern sort of approaching them, asking politely, I think they would give them a moment of their time to sit down with them. So I think just tell them what you want.
I would
Yeah,
agree.
I would
Steve.
follow up. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, I was just gonna say I would agree, but go ahead, Colette.
Well, one of the things that I like to do if I'm interested in a company, or, I'm interested in like an opportunity, and I know someone who knows that person, I would get them to introduce me to that person, and then invite that person out for maybe like a coffee or like a chat. In these days, you're not going to coffee with anyone, but you're having a chat. You know what I mean? Like you're having a 15-minute chat, and you're just, say, hey, I'm really interested in working for this company. This is what I've been hired to do. I really would like to pursue a professional opportunity. And, I really value your experience, your position in the company. What would you suggest I do? And let them lead you, because they're already there. So
Right.
they know what it is they know what you need to do in order to get in the door. So let them lead you. That would be my advice.
I think it's great advice, and I think, Shazim, you plant the seed. You pick and choose the right timing, of course. Because as Daniel said, you let your message be heard, but you be careful not too loud. There's a subtle quality that you need to probably maintain, but if you don't ask, you don't get.
That's true.
Right.
Good question, Shazim.
Thank you.
All right, who's up? Come on. Don't be shy. I know there's questions out there.
Do you just start picking on people now, Jimmy? You just start.
No, I don't
just-
pick on. I don't pick on.
Oh,
I
Do
don't.
we get to pick on people? No.
I'm too old to pick on people now. They pick on me. So, but seriously,
I have a question.
okay, who is
Okay.
that?
Hi, me, Jerry.
Introduce
so-
yourself. How are you doing?
Okay, so my name is Jerry. I'm currently a second year at Stony Brook University, double majoring in information systems and business management, both specialized in finance. I just want to ask, like, in an interview, right? Because I've heard mixed things about it. So during the interview, like, what are the interviewers really looking for? Are they looking for your personality, or are they looking for your like hard skills? So for example, if I'm interviewing for, let's just say, comp sci, right? For comp sci position, right? Are they like looking for my skill in terms of like how I would code, or are they looking for my personality, like how I would interact with the team and stuff like that?
I think it's both, really. They definitely want to make sure that you have the skill set that they're looking for. But I think like anything in any industry, any job, they want to make sure that it's a good fit from a personality perspective as well. But yeah, I would probably defer, a little bit to Colette on this one, maybe, and see what they have to say. But my initial thought was like that both are really important. And you need to show that you're able to bring that skill set, but also be somebody that fits with the team.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with Dan. But I'm gonna be honest with you from a recruiting perspective. I would say, skills are something that you could teach and you can learn, but you can't learn your personality. You are what you are. You are who you are. And even if you have the skills, sometimes you're just not going to fit with that team. You know what I mean? So in my opinion, this is just my opinion, I really do think that personality matters more than skill. I really do.
I agree. I think, that was going to be my answer. And I was surprised because, I didn't know Jean, you're asking from finance. And so I didn't want to answer it because I didn't want to misdirect you. But that would be my answer from publishing, from this end, from where we are. It's always like I think from a skill perspective, HR wouldn't even give us the resumes if they didn't meet certain criteria. So every, those 5 pieces of paper on the table all sort of more or less have those skills. And then when you bring somebody in, it really is what Colette said. Are they the right fit for us? Do they have the right? And as the person's talking, I'm automatically thinking, oh, how are they going to interact with Sue? How are they going to interact with Jimmy? How are they, you start, telling a story in your head with this person as you hear them speak, and you just watch them. And I think personality is what you can't get on a piece of paper.
Yeah, I want to add to that because I'm not a big fan, and students don't take this the wrong way, but I'm not a big fan of hard skill, soft skill. I think there are the hard skills for sure. You've got to have those. You got to match the criteria. If the symmetry is not there, they're not going to hire you. But soft skills, they're life skills. I think that's really a better term for that. Communication, problem solving, and awareness, and so on. They are life skills. And you develop them through time and experience. Experience is always going to be the key to your next door. So I think that's a great way to perceive it. But I agree with all of the panel from a coach's perspective. I think, yes, they definitely want to understand who you are.
Yeah, and I think the authenticity thing comes back in there too, because you don't want to try to, put on a facade and pretend to be one thing. It's like, it's exhausting to try to pretend to be what you think they want, you to be. You just go in there and you're yourself. You got to be prepared. You want to show enthusiasm and be engaged, but at the end of the day, you're you. So and again, it goes both ways. Like if they don't hire you, that's probably for the best. You're going to find something that is a better suit for you.
Yep, we all have our story. We embrace it. We tell it. That's it. And the more you try to be what you're not, the more you're going to screw it up. And that's the word authenticity. Honesty is, with rare exception, the best policy.
I just want to add one thing to that. When I interview, and I do interview, I like to find out. I always have like a personality question for my future hiring manager, because I know my personality. My personality, I'm outgoing. I don't like to use the word aggressive because it just has a negative connotation to me, but I'm more of like, I would say I'm a wheeler and dealer. Like that's what I do, because that's what recruiters do, right? We're constantly wheeling and dealing, getting that candidate in the door, getting that offer done. And I want to work for someone who understands that type of personality. So I always come with a personality question for that hiring manager. And if that hiring manager answers that question in the way that I think is reflects more of my personality, where we're aligned, I'm like, this is good. I like this person. We can work together. Because I think that, when you're having an interview, you're so concentrated on getting that person to understand that you are good for the job, but you need to understand as the interviewee if that person's good for you.
I think that's a great point. So there's a question in the chat from Victoria, although it says to everyone, but she seems to be directing it to you, Daniel. The question might be directed primarily towards Daniel, but in the publishing industry, is getting or having an internship required, and is it advantageous in order to get hired?
It is absolutely advantageous to have an internship to get hired. It's not a requirement at all. That said, we have I'm trying to come up with an accurate percentage. I would say of the internships we have had, and we have one, I think the breakdown is like one a year for half the year. I think that's right, that we get through Penguin Random House and their internship system. It is absolutely advantageous because you'll have those skills as you go somewhere else, but we have also more than not hired our interns. I would say at least 50% of our interns that have come in for internships have made their way into a full-time position. That has a lot to do with timing, someone leaves, something like that, but being in the right place in the right time, already working with this group, and a designer position becomes available. Meanwhile, there's an intern sitting there learning all these skills. They have the right, like we just said, personality. They're a great fit. They're great to work with. They're willing and able and have all the hard skills. Of course, you're gonna. There's your person right there. You're gonna at least consider them. So you'll be sitting in the right seat if that moment comes up in an internship. So not a requirement, but absolutely advantageous in publishing.
Yeah, I mean, I would think, Colette, you cover a lot of different industries. I would think that would probably hold true for most, correct? I mean,
Yes, I would agree.
Yeah.
Internships, it's really, I would say it's almost mandatory that you would have some sort of an internship in your college career.
so, yeah, I mean, there are students that we work with that don't have internships. They've had, summer jobs, camp counselor, whatever it might be. And there are a lot of those life skills in those, areas. But there's no question for the students, an internship it's experience, and it will open up doors. So Dan, did you ever intern when you started out?
Yes, I think I was in college, like maybe like a sophomore or junior. And it was actually through my parents, the ad agency that they used to place ads for CTI. But so yeah, it was interesting. But yeah, that it was helpful. Once I got into, I mean, for my specific career, it's in creative. You can come out of college and get a job by building a portfolio, but it's very advantageous to go to one of these kind of portfolio schools where you're basically spending a year or two honing your craft and building out the portfolio, and then you essentially get recruited from those schools. So but there are even through that school they would do internships, so they're very valuable, I think, across every industry.
I agree. I think if you guys can get one, you get one. And Dan brought up Networking 101, his internship through his parents, who that's how you find these opportunities, guys. So
Yeah.
Remember CTI.
we're going to are there any other questions? If not, we're going to wrap it up. We really kind of did this right on time, which is amazing. Anybody have any other questions? All right. Time's up. So I'm going to close this out. And for students who know me, I present a lot. I typically will add a little philosophy to what I present. So I want to leave you guys with this thought. And I think all three of our panel will agree with me on this, because I know they like what they do. But when you do what you like, guys, it's called love. When you do what you don't like, it's called stress. So you think about that. You think about what it is you want to do, and you try hard to achieve that. It's worth it. It's worth it. When you work 6, 8, 10, 12 hours a day doing what you don't like, it's hard time.
Yeah.
So I'm encouraging all of you to think from your heart, what's your passion? Let that drive you. That's my philosophy for the night. So I got to close out. A couple of nods to our interns, Dabney, Waverly, and Emilio. Always without your support, I float in the abyss. So thank you, and thank you. To our esteemed panel, Colette, Dan, and Daniel, I cannot thank you enough. Your insight was great. I know there's great takeaway for the students, so I am grateful. The Career Center of the university, we are all grateful for you to be here. And of course, our audience. Without you guys, what do we have? So thanks for attending. The bummer of these events is we don't get to schmooze and we don't get to network, but next year. So again, thanks everybody. Go have dinner, go have your cocktail, whatever it is you guys do. And thank you, and thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.